from the heart of Dubai. This is Sports Unhinged with Mohamed Hamiz.
And we are on. Hello and welcome to Sports Unhinged. My name is Mohamed Hamiz, and however you might be listening to us today, whether it's SoundCloud, iTunes, Apple Podcast app, Stitcher, Facebook, or YouTube, we are glad that you can be here with us. A very interesting show that we have for you today. It's not the usual kind of material that we cover where we go over what happened in the world of sports and we talk about it and we analyze it. What we saw this week is something that is unprecedented because the President of the United States has entered into this conflict with the sports world, and the backlash has been absolutely unbelievable. Now, you've seen that we usually try to keep it politics-free here on Sports Unhinged, but we can't help it this week because sometimes, although the sports world is where we go to escape the reality of life, this week, the reality has infiltrated the sports world that we go to. Donald Trump, for those who haven't heard or maybe been living under a rock, has decided to go after the NFL and the NBA in the same day. Now, I'm not sure which one came first. I'd like to think that he woke up one day and, the wife is in Canada attending some events. He's probably got nothing to do, probably wearing his boxer shorts, sitting on a beanbag, eating Cheetos, switched on his TV and saw the Fox News coverage of the interview with Steph Curry where he's saying that he might not be visiting the White House with the Golden State Warriors. And of course, the champions of the NBA and the champions of the NFL every single year visit the White House. And Donald Trump decided to tweet that since you're hesitating, Mr. Steph Curry, I am rescinding or revoking the invitation to the White House. That obviously created a huge outlash led by LeBron James, who called Donald Trump a bum for the tweet that he sent out. And it just kind of snowballed from there. Now, Friday night, there was also a rally which Donald Trump attended. And he was giving a speech. And it's funny how a speech given by the President of the United States at a rally includes sentences that we can't repeat on the air over here. We're trying to keep Sports Unhinged PG-13, but Trump called players that are kneeling during the national anthem, obviously following the trend that Colin Kaepernick has started. He called them SOBs. And he said that the owners should be firing every single SOB player that kneels during the national anthem. Now, this kind of took the whole NFL world by surprise, and we saw a massive backlash in yesterday's games. Obviously, we're recording this on a Monday night. Yesterday, we saw full teams, not coming out to the national anthem. We saw tens and tens of players kneeling. We saw owners locking arms with players in protest of what Donald Trump has said. Now, let's start with the fact that the term SOBs, and I can't, say the full version of it. Let's start with the fact that that is a derogatory term, especially towards women. Colin Kaepernick's mother replied, well, if Donald Trump says that, then I guess I am a proud B. And he didn't stop there. In this speech, he also said that he wants to see a tougher version of the game, where he enjoys seeing players collide in violent fashion, and how the game has gone soft because referees throw flags every time that two players collide in a violent fashion. Mind you, this all happened in the same week, maybe a day after we saw the reports coming out about Aaron Hernandez and how after he took his life in prison and his brain was tested, there were record levels of CTE recorded, the most CTE levels ever recorded on a 27-year-old human being. This is the President of the United States. Now, most of the people that know me, I am not American. And a lot of what I'm going to say today, the response could be by some people that might disagree is, you're not American. This is none of your business. Well, if Donald Trump is the leader of the free world, he's kind of everybody's business at this point. And yes, I might not be qualified to talk about certain things that only Americans can probably experience. Certain things that only African Americans can only experience. But I would like to think that we live in a world right now where we're getting closer to each other, where we're more sensitive and conscientious to each other's cultures. And therefore, it's kind of difficult for me not to voice what I still believe is something that needs to be said, not only by those that are affected, but those who are not. We've seen a lot of white athletes during the civil rights movement that heavily contributed to the change that has occurred. A lot of white politicians that actually influenced and heavily participated in the civil change and the civil liberties that eventually took place in the United States. Now, one thing I want to mention is that when Donald Trump suggested that the owners fire those players, he was actually breaking the law. There is a congressional legislation, US Code number 227, that is titled wrongly influencing a private entity's employment decisions by a member of Congress or an officer or employee of the legislative and executive branch. So by trying to influence the owners to fire players for kneeling during the national anthem, Donald Trump might have actually broken certain US laws. When kneeling for the national anthem does not break any laws, the actions of the players is not something that is breaking any laws whatsoever. It is a peaceful form of protest. Now, I'm not the one who decide whether this form of protest is correct or it's offensive, but I know one thing, that it's legal. It doesn't break any laws. Same with not visiting the White House after winning a championship. When the New England Patriots won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, Tom Brady decided not to go to the White House to visit Barack Obama, who was president at the time. And he cited a family matter. That same day, paparazzi caught him with pictures by himself in a mall buying a watch. No tweets from Barack Obama. No disinvitations. No public outcry. It's a personal decision. Similarly, we would have liked to see the same thing when it comes to the reaction to Steph Curry saying that he didn't want to go. Now, for those people who are saying that sports personalities are these spoilt, overpaid babies who play a child's game and they should stick to that, let's just not forget that sports personalities have been part of social change for a very long time. We all remember when the Cleveland Summit took place with Jim Brown bringing in Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Muhammad Ali, and a bunch of other prominent athletes, African-American athletes at the time, to protest the reaction to Muhammad Ali's refusal to fight in the Vietnam War. We don't even have to go that far back. Let's go back 2 weeks ago with J.J. Watt, where the change that he was able to create was very positive in collecting over $30 million of relief funds for the hurricanes that hit Houston and Miami. There are many, many examples of sports personalities influencing social change to the positive and actually putting pressure on politicians and the legislation that comes out from the politics world. In this particular case, I think Colin Kaepernick started this whole kneeling in the national anthem. And the reason why he did it is because he wanted his country to have a conversation about race, about racial equality. And I think that in one speech on Friday night, Donald Trump gave Colin Kaepernick exactly what he wanted. And it's a very simple kind of question. Who do you side with? Do you side with the narcissistic, psychopathic, pathological liar who's a con man, racist, and misogynist, or the players who are peacefully trying to catalyze and influence positive change towards racial equality. Now, before we all set our hair on fire, let's not forget that this is a tactic that we've seen from Donald Trump many, many times. Whenever he feels that he is failing at a particular case or topic, he just throws a big ball of glitter in the air, and we all watch the glitter and forget the real issues. Now, I'm no American, but I read the news every day. And I know that there are problems. There's a Russia investigation. There's a failed healthcare bill. There aren't enough policies that can help better defend and protect against natural disasters. There needs to be a tax reform policy based on data and research. Policies to stop throwing folks in jail because of a plant. Eradicating homelessness and starvation, yes, in the United States. Not provoking crazy dictators and advancing the race towards nuclear wars and nuclear weapons. All of these are topics that should be in the center of attention. And finally, what Colin Kaepernick has been protesting is holding the police accountable, making sure that they get more money, more and better training in de-escalation tactics instead of the shoot first, ask questions later approach that is being followed right now. So I hope that what's happening in the sports world right now kind of steers the conversation back towards these topics, and that politics can exit the sports world once again and become that safe haven for everybody else to escape to. It's definitely an interesting world that we live in, but unfortunately, right now, this is becoming a topic that is dominating the sports world. So that's our take on this particular issue. When we come back in the next segment, we're going to be talking a little bit about boxing. Again, this show is probably taking a bit of a negative tone today, because what we saw in the world of boxing with Canelo Triple G and the judging and the controversy that surrounded that is again a topic that needs to be discussed in the boxing world, which is corruption. We'll be right back in the next segment.
You're listening to the Sports Unhinged podcast.
Welcome back. This is Sports Unhinged. Now, before I go into the next segment, let me just apologize for my voice. One of our co-founders here at Sports Unhinged invited me to his birthday party, which happened to be in a karaoke place. And I kind of sang my heart out for 3 straight hours and lost my voice. And that's why we couldn't record this podcast yesterday or the day before, because I was still recovering. But anyways, let's move on to this next topic, which is boxing. We had probably one of the best fights in a long time with Canelo versus Triple G. Now, boxing to me is a very special sport. There are things in life when you do the firsts, you know, your first time riding a bike without the training wheels. It's an awesome experience. When you get your first salary, your first day at school, buying your first car, or hearing, you know, your first newborn cry for the first time. These are all really special moments. And for all of you sports fans, I'm sure that you have similar moments when it comes to sports. I, for one, remember my earliest football memory was in the 1994 World Cup final, Italy versus Brazil. And I can still remember Roberto Baggio just looking down in agony after missing that penalty and handing the World Cup to Brazil. I remember the first Royal Rumble that I saw in the WWE. Back then it was the WWF. Very special moments. First Olympics. Now, when it comes to boxing, my first was something very special. I was 13 years old. Never was really into boxing before that. And I was living in London. And a fighter by the name of Naseem Hamed was dominating the boxing world in the featherweight division. A showboaty kind of extravagant personality. Very polarizing. People either loved him or hated him. But he happened to be a Yemeni British fighter. And he happened to give everybody that worked at the Yemen embassy ringside tickets to his fights. So my dad, who worked there at the time, took me to my first boxing fight. 13 years old, ringside. The only guy sitting in front of me is the guy that rings the bell. In the prelim fights, whenever the boxers got close to our side of the ropes and they punched each other, the sweat would actually hit us. It was an incredible experience in the London Olympia. I think it was the year 2000. And then Prince Naseem came down like he was Aladdin on a magic carpet from the roof of the London Olympia, danced his way to the ring, got in there. He was fighting a guy by the name of Vuyani Bungu. The guy didn't have a chance. He lost the fight before he even stepped into the ring, and he got knocked out. After that, I got to go into the ring, say hello to the champ, and be personally introduced to him. Now, mind you, Prince Naseem was a fantastic fighter, but I grew up to kind of dislike his personality. It was a bit too showboaty for me. And you'll notice a pattern here. I have the same feelings towards Mayweather. Maybe not so much McGregor, because there's a bit of a, I don't know, the Irish charm has a bit of a different effect, I guess. But that was the first experience that I had to boxing. And the reason why I mentioned that is just to kind of stress of how special this sport is to me. And to a lot of the boxing fans out there, I'm sure you share my feelings when I say that we're sick and tired of the corruption that is happening in the sports of boxing. Now, we saw the Triple G versus Canelo fight last week. I personally don't have a problem with the outcome, but I do have a problem with one of the judges' scorecard. And the sad thing is, it was a terrific fight. And nobody was talking about the fight afterwards. All everybody talked about was the judges' scorecard. Don't get me wrong, I am going to talk about it too. But before that, I think we owe that amazing fight a little time to talk about it, to analyze it, to see what happened there. So here's my take or my analysis on the fight that I saw. It was definitely a very close fight, an incredibly tense fight. Both fighters were finding it hard to land decisive shots. Canelo was being active only in little spurts. I think his inactivity actually hurt him, and he threw away rounds. Golovkin was walking forward as expected the whole time, but he was unusually conservative in the first few rounds, and he gave them away as well. The middle rounds were absolutely incredible. All that said, Canelo proved to be very elusive and very difficult to hit. And I've seen a lot of people commenting about how Canelo was running the whole fight, and they started comparing him or calling him the new Mayweather. I'm sorry, you have one of the most devastating punchers standing in front of you. What are you supposed to do? Just stand there and take the hits? I think Canelo's footwork was absolutely fantastic. He was very elusive, but like I said, his inactivity gave away a lot of rounds, and he landed very few meaningful power shots or power punches in the middle rounds of the fight. The majority of his power punches came in the last 3 rounds of the fight. So this made the fight very difficult to score. Now, when it comes to ring generalship, I think it really depends on whether you think that Golovkin was walking Canelo down the whole time, or if he was being led by Canelo across the ring. In my opinion, and I think a lot of people would agree, we would take the former, which is Golovkin was dominating, he was the aggressor, the majority of the fight, he was moving forward. He actually had Canelo on the ropes, and I was surprised that Golovkin did not utilize the body shots to break Canelo down. There was definitely a little bit of nervousness there. Now, there was a very special moment. It's when Canelo realized that he was fighting somebody that is not your regular human being. I think Canelo realized at some point that he was fighting the Terminator. He was fighting RoboCop. And that point came in the 9th round. I think it was there was about 1 minute to 1 minute 36 seconds left in the 9th round, where Canelo threw a very powerful overhand that hit Triple G straight in the ear. That punch, ladies and gentlemen, would have knocked out a mule. It would have knocked out a bull. Triple G, his head snapped, and it snapped right back into position, and he kept moving forward. He disregarded it as if it didn't happen. Triple G should be tested for injecting cement into his skull, because his ability to take punches, it's unbelievable. And you can see at that moment in Canelo's eyes that he realized he's not winning this fight. It was a terrific contest. And I think a rematch would be even better, because both fighters now have a frame of reference that they can use to build their strategy of how to approach the fight. Golovkin, I don't think, will be nervous again. And Canelo will know that he'll need to press 3 minutes at a time to actually score some meaningful points if it went to a decision. Now, if we look at the punch stats, Golovkin outlanded Canelo 218 to 169. He landed more punches overall, or out-punched Canelo in 10 of the 12 rounds. He also landed twice as many jabs as Canelo, 108 to 55, almost twice as many. Yes, Canelo landed 4 more power punches, but the majority, like I said, came in the last 3 rounds. So I had the fight scored 115 to 113 for Golovkin, with Canelo taking the 1st, the 2nd, barely the 6th, 11th, and the 12th. And I had Triple G taking the rest. Now, in reality, it was a very tight fight. So I find variances of the score that I gave acceptable. So I was okay with 114, which ended up making the fight a draw. I was okay with the judge that scored it 115 to 113 to Triple G. But I honestly can't see a way to Canelo winning it. I've watched the fight 3 times, and I cannot see a way in which Canelo wins that fight. I don't think he worked hard enough to score enough points. Now, Canelo after the fight said that he easily won 7 or 8 rounds. I'd like to know which ones. I wish he would explain which ones. And you know, the score of a draw, it's a bit of a shame for me. It's a shame for Triple G. It's a shame for the boxing fans. And this is why. It's a shame for Triple G because he couldn't cement his legacy. He has been the most avoided fighter of the modern era. And for us boxing fans, it's a shame because yet again, a great fight still left a very, very sour taste in our mouths. And that came from the 3rd judge, Adelaide Bird, who scored the fight 118 to 110 to Canelo. This lady saw Canelo winning 10 of the 12 rounds. I'm no boxing expert. I'm a fan. Maybe a bit more than an average fan, but I'm just a fan at the end of the day. And I can't see how Canelo can win more than 5 rounds in this fight. Barely. And it's a shame for Triple G because I have very high doubts that this rematch will happen anytime soon. I think Canelo knows in his heart that he lost that fight. I think he knows the power that he went up against. I think he was hurt by a lot of the punches. And I don't think he wants to get back in the ring with Triple G for at least another couple of years when Triple G is probably 37 years old and he has declined. Now, we saw controversial scores last week as well, a couple of days ago, in the WBO heavyweight title between Joseph Parker, who retained his title against Hughie Fury. One judge scored it 114-114. Two judges scored it 118-110. That was not a 118-110 score. Yes, I think the outcome was correct, but it was a much closer fight than that. So let's go back to this lady, Adelaide Byrd. She did not just only score this fight between Triple G and Canelo in a controversial way. If you look at the history of this judge, she might have also forgotten her glasses when she was responsible for the Amir Khan versus Canelo fight. Because she was the only judge that had Amir Khan ahead 48-47 before Canelo knocked him out. This was the only judge who had Bernard Hopkins as the winner versus Joe Calzaghe, 114-113 in 2008. She didn't even leave her controversy to boxing alone. She gave it a go at the MMA world. She was the only judge who had Nam Phan as the winner of the Ultimate Fighter finale versus Leonard Garcia. And the only judge who had Melvin Gillard as the winner in UFC 155 against Jamie Varner, before Dana White decided that he would never let her judge in the UFC or in MMA again. Complete incompetence as far as combat sports are concerned. I think that there needs to be an investigation as to why such an incompetent or corrupt person, because it's either incompetence or corruption, pick your poison. Why has she been let back by the boxing associations to be a judge over and over and over again? Now, obviously, my reaction is quite severe to what has happened here, but I saw some rhetoric floating around in social media, and by the way, stay away from the comment sections of YouTube videos and social media posts because it's full of filth. There were some people out there that were saying that women should not be allowed to judge in a male-dominated sport like combat sports, like boxing or MMA, which is going too far. It's not about gender here. It's about competence. Men, women, I don't care if you get an alien from Mars to judge the fight, as long as they're competent at what they're doing. Adelaide Byrd was way off the mark here. And we can go back and forth all day and focus on her, which is what happened in the media after that fight. But the real issue here that we need to be discussing is how do we fix this problem in boxing? These issues of corruption and wild scoring inconsistencies are as old as the sport itself. They've been going on forever. And I think that if boxing is to find any redemption in the public's mind, especially when it comes to the casual supporters, then the change needs to start with the judging. Yes, I've said in previous episodes that the federations need to get together and fight under one umbrella, which is something that still needs to happen. But let's address the point of judging. And it's not very difficult. It's not difficult at all to solve this problem. I can suggest a couple of solutions. Why not expand the number of judges from 3 to 7? Why don't you just make it 7 judges, drop the 2 outlying scores, the 2 most severe scores, or the most inconsistent scores at the end, and judge the fight based on the middle 5 judges' scorecards? It will be far more difficult to corrupt a group of people than one individual when they're one of 3 judges and they can easily sway the outcome of a fight one way or another. Especially if you get 7 judges from different places. Here's another thought. Why don't the judges release their scorecards between each round? Make it public. Don't keep everybody guessing. If you have a bias, show it from the beginning. You're going to be put under pressure to make sure that you put your scores in and you can't change them halfway through the fight. Also, this way, the fighters are informed of what's going on and they know whether they need to finish the fight or whether they're ahead by points or behind. And by the way, I'm okay with that change being implemented in both MMA and in boxing. What we saw in the Canelo Triple G fight stinks of corruption, stinks of incompetence, it stinks of bribes, it stinks of conspiracy. And this is a stench that we've been smelling in the sport of boxing for years and years. I'm sure many of you who are boxing fans saw Teddy Atlas on ESPN lose his mind with Stephen A. Smith over this topic. This is a guy that's in the sport of boxing. He's trained, he's boxed, he's been in that sport of boxing for decades. And you can see the level of frustration because the corruption is not even hidden. It's out there for everybody to see. And one of the main problems with boxing, and that's why MMA or the UFC has been able to outgrow boxing in terms of popularity, in terms of revenues, is because in boxing, the power is always with the promoter. The lead promoter in a fight picks the judges. And I don't know if it's a fair statement or not, but Golden Boy Promotions, led by Oscar De La Hoya, I think we've seen enough from them right now to conclude that they're most likely corrupt. The word on the street in the boxing world is that you should not go to the judges' scorecard against a Golden Boy boxer. Even when Floyd Mayweather dominated Canelo in one of the most dominant fights that he has had, he made Canelo look like a beginner. He took him to school. One judge still scored that fight 114 to 114. A draw. The backlash was so massive from that score that that judge had to resign afterwards. So honestly, would I put it past Golden Boy Promotions to pay Adelaide Bird a bribe for that crazy scorecard? I wouldn't. I wouldn't put it past them. There's too much power with the promoters. And I don't think Golden Boy would let their cash cow, which is Canelo Alvarez, lose a fight if they could do something to influence the scores. We should have all known this. We should have all known that this was going to happen when we saw that score in the Mayweather fight all these years ago. Anybody fighting under Oscar De La Hoya has a question mark on them in terms of the scorecards. Canelo's a great fighter. This is not an attack on Canelo himself. We're talking about the judges here. Now, another conspiracy that's been floating around with this fight is that Golden Boy Promotions lost so much money because of the Mayweather-McGregor fight and how it overshadowed their promotion that even though Canelo Triple G was scheduled before the McGregor fight was announced, that it was fixed to be a draw so that there is a rematch and they can recover some of the lost revenue. Because if you think about it, if you just spent $100 to watch McGregor Mayweather a few weeks ago, how likely would it be for you to pay again to watch Triple G and Canelo? Now, this is a conspiracy that I'm not 100% on, because I don't think that Canelo wants to fight Triple G again. I think Triple G wins much more decisively if the rematch happens anytime soon. It's quite ironic how we thought, or a lot of people were saying, that McGregor-Mayweather was going to do a lot of harm to the sport of boxing. It's ironic that the result of this magnificent fight that we saw between Triple G and Canelo has probably done more harm to the interest of the casual fan than anything else could have. How could you take a sport seriously when the scoring system is so easily and noticeably rigged? Now, boxing could make a quick comeback into the mainstream. And I've said this before. They could make a comeback if all of the fighters and the promoters agreed to fight for one world title per division. Enough of this WBO, WBC, IBF, It's just too many titles, too many belts floating around. Teddy Atlas was talking about how a few years ago, the president of the IBF was convicted of receiving bribes, basically selling rankings to fighters. George Foreman in 1995 did not fight his mandatory because it was rumored that there was a $100,000 bribe that was given to the IBF. If they all unite under one umbrella, one world title per division, and an instituted sliding scale scoring system, just like the UFC, just like MMA. In boxing, it could be based on power punches, punches landed, knockdowns, simple solutions. It's not too difficult. But of course, none of that will happen because we have the integrity of this sport being sold out. Again, like I said, I hope the Canelo Triple G fight happens, but I highly doubt it. Now, in the boxing world, we also saw another very interesting headline. Andre Ward decided to retire. It came out of the blue, nobody expected it, and my reaction to this was frustration more than anything. Now, I kind of get it from Andre Ward's perspective, because if you look at Ward and where he finds himself right now in the sport of boxing, he must be asking the question, what's left for me here? And boxing is the kind of sport that you need to be 100% in on. You cannot kind of half do it. And Ward was mentioning how the physical wear and tear, the lack of desire, some of the reasons why he decided to call it a day. He's undefeated. I think he's a Hall of Famer for sure. But there was really nothing left for him in the sport of boxing. He's already cleared out and moved up from 168 pounds. I can't see him going back down to that level. A lot of people were saying Triple G should fight Andre Ward. I think Triple G would be stupid to go above 168 pounds, and I don't think Ward can make 168 pounds. If you look at the 175-pound division, he beat Kovalev twice. Kovalev is the consensus number one in that division. And yes, there was a little bit of controversy in his wins against Kovalev. 3 American judges giving the American boxer in America the nod over the Russian fighter. I mean, it was a close fight as well. But I don't think Ward ever saw that fight as unfinished business with Kovalev. He beat him twice. The second time, in my opinion, there was a few low blows that he threw at the closing seconds of that fight. But I think Kovalev was ready to quit. The outcome would have been the same. Now, here's where the frustration comes in for me when it comes to Andre Ward. Since beating Carl Froch at the end of 2011, Ward has had about 7 fights, 7 bouts. If we look at all of these fights, only 3 of them you can say were meaningful fights. I think the Chad Dawson, who was the 175-pound champion at the time, was a very good fight, although Dawson seemed very badly weight drained during that fight. And then the 2 with Kovalev. So across the 5 to 6 years, which generally constitute the prime of a fighter's career, which is their late 20s, early 30s, Ward only had 3 meaningful fights during that period. And it was essentially by choice. He wasn't sidelined by injury. It was mainly through people refusing to fight him and him refusing to fight people. It was basically him trying to get out of promotional contracts without a real cause a lot of the time. So that's where the frustration is. We didn't get to see enough of this great fighter at his prime. Now, he was a fantastic boxer. And he's one of those fighters that he may not be the most exciting or the most popular boxer, but he definitely had that technical brilliance. He had those smart game plans. He always neutralized his opponent's strength. And another thing that makes you either love him or hate him, he was willing to get dirty. He was willing to break the rules without really breaking the rules. The low blows against Kovalev is just an example. And when it comes to defensive fighters, I wasn't always a fan of his style. Never been a big fan of Mayweather's style either. And I think he got away with a lot of the action that he did in the clinches, the holding. It kind of frustrates the average viewer, but he always found a way to win. And he had a great jab. His jab is absolutely incredible. It always came from different angles. He had excellent footwork. And he beat everybody that was viable that was presented in front of him. So in terms of Hall of Fame, yes, I think Andre Ward deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He had an understated personality in general, and that makes it very rare for somebody with that kind of personality to become such a star. I think Andre Ward, if you just gave him a little bit more one-punch power, you wouldn't be far off from the perfect boxer. So good luck to him. I hope this is one of those retirements where it's not really a retirement, where he will be coming back in a couple of years. He just might want to get a break from people talking to him about refighting Kovalev or fighting Triple G. Who knows? So here's a fighter that has ended his career at the top. Let's go on the opposite side of that coin. A fighter that had all of the potential in the world and couldn't meet it. And yes, I'm talking about Adrien Broner. TMZ released a video of Adrien Broner in Las Vegas knocking out a random guy in the street and pushing a woman. And when it comes to Broner, now that is a frustrating boxer or a frustrating story to look at, because this guy had all the potential in the world, but his demons, his inner demons, is something that he couldn't fight off. After he lost the last fight to Mikey Garcia, I thought that his career will continue. He kind of he is not an elite fighter. He can still be in high-profile fights, but not super fights anymore, especially after that loss to Mikey Garcia. But he needs to work his way up. The fact that he lost to two smaller fighters that moved up to fight him hurt his career quite significantly. So maybe if he took a couple of tune-up fights and one tougher fight, maybe he could have gotten back to some championship fights. Now, Adrien Broner, to me, falls into a category that I call the gatekeeper category. It's B-level fighters. B-level fighters that can only beat other B-level fighters. They're gatekeepers to that elite status. And in that group, I put him along with the likes of Soto Karass, Robert the Ghost Guerrero. I put him in there with Chris Algieri, Andre Berto, who fought Mayweather in what was supposed to be his last fight, his 49th fight before he fought McGregor. Victor Ortiz, I think, falls in that category as well. Luis Callazo, for example, falls in that category. Those are the gatekeeper B-level categories. Now, Adrien Broner in that group was always the most likely to break into the elite status, to break into that A-level. And we still don't know what his problem is. Is it the lack of solid training? Is it needing a new coach? Is it the too much partying and his life outside of the ring? Is it not enough focus? What we know is that he made too many consistent mistakes that stunted the athleticism that he has. His main one being his punching output during the fights. Adrien Broner, for a guy as athletic as he is, should have a lot more volume, a lot more punches in bunches out there in the ring. If you don't throw many punches, your speed usually is ineffective in a lot of scenarios. So in my opinion, I think the first thing is that he needs to get help. The trouble that he keeps running into is something that could turn him from a boxer, like I spent the last 2-3 minutes talking about Adrien Broner in the boxing context. But the way that, or the incidences that have been happening outside of the ring could turn him into somebody that we talk about in the past tense. Somebody that could have a very abrupt end to his career, maybe his life. It's that dangerous with Adrien Broner. But if I was in his close circle, I would advise him to change trainers. I would advise him to tweak his fighting style. I would advise him to get rid of his persona. He's trying too hard to be Floyd Mayweather, flashing the money, talking about billions. Floyd Mayweather only took on that persona after he established himself, after he perfected his craft. Let's not forget, Mayweather was called Pretty Boy Floyd for the first part of his career. He changed it to Floyd Money Mayweather only after that. This will take time for Adrien Broner, and I'm really rooting for him because he is a talented individual. He needs to make those adjustments. If he doesn't, at best, he will remain a B-level fighter. At worst, like I said, it could be a lot more severe than that. Because if you look at his resume right now, the 3 losses are not technically that bad, but it's the way that he lost that's going to affect how we perceive him going forward. So all the best to Adrien Broner. I really hope that from now onwards, especially after he admitted on social media that he needs help, that we only see positive news from here onwards. Now, we've dedicated this whole second segment to boxing because I feel that boxing always takes a backseat to football. It always takes a backseat to, I'm not going to call it soccer, the other football, although the NFL should be referred to as the other football, and the UFC. But there's a lot that is happening in the boxing world. And I think there's a lot that we can look forward to in terms of good fights that are finally happening in the boxing world. So expect us to be talking a lot more boxing on the way forward. When we come back, we will wrap up the show with a little bit of NBA. Huge news coming out with Carmelo Anthony being traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Will the Thunder be able to challenge the Warriors for the title? We'll talk about that when we come back.
You're listening to Sports Unhinged.
Well, the NBA offseason has again failed to disappoint us. Very big news coming out of the New York Knicks. Carmelo Anthony has been traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder. In return, the Knicks get Enes Kanter, Doug McDermott, and a 2018 second-round pick. And one person that you have to feel for here is Enes Kanter, for sure. Because just the day before the trade came out, Enes Kanter was tweeting about how Oklahoma is the most professional organization in the NBA, how he calls everybody family over there, and how much he loves being there. He's probably the only guy on that team that is truly 100% happy to be living in Oklahoma. And what happens the next day? He gets traded. Now, did he have an idea that he might get traded? Maybe, and that's possibly why he tweeted that tweet. The one thing he said to his team, though, before leaving is, please beat the Golden State Warriors for me. Now, with Carmelo Anthony, Russell Westbrook, and Paul George, a lot of people seem to think that this big three in this team will be able to challenge the Golden State Warriors. I don't think they're even close. I mean, let's look at the Oklahoma City Thunder right now. Carmelo Anthony is 32 years old. Yes, he's one of the best shooters in the game. Paul George isn't as good as Kevin Durant, if you want to make that comparison, since we're doing it with the Golden State Warriors. Plus, Oklahoma City has given up a lot of depth to get Carmelo Anthony. In my opinion, they'll get no more than 55 wins during the season, and I think they lose in the first or the second round of the playoffs. If they bump into the Rockets, if they bump into the San Antonio Spurs, of course, if they bump into the Golden State Warriors, I think Oklahoma loses against all three of these teams. The reason for that, all these teams play better team ball. You've put a bunch of individuals, two of them are ball hoggers. I mean, let's call a spade here. Russell Westbrook likes to keep the ball, and so does Carmelo Anthony. Now, you might come back to me and say, oh, well, Russell Westbrook just broke the record for the most triple-doubles. A triple-double includes assists. But hey, Russell Westbrook only makes those assists when he wants to make those assists to get that triple-double. Now, don't get me wrong, he's one of my favorite players in the NBA. But this is not going to be a roster that can challenge the Golden State Warriors. For one, the Warriors have defense. They have a very deep bench. And they have the top 4 players in the world. I mean, you have Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. If you look at the bench, they've got Nick Young, Caspi, they've got Iguodala. Who am I forgetting? JaVale McGee, Livingston, they got McCaw. Who does Oklahoma City have? Those 3 and Adams? There's no depth. How are they going to challenge the Warriors? I don't think it's even close. I'll be happy if they could challenge the Rockets, if they can challenge the San Antonio Spurs, but I still think they lose against both of these teams. Now, when we look at Carmelo, he's been in a train wreck, fire dumpster of an organization in the New York Knicks for the longest time. And none of us have seen him play a role on a team, a supporting role. He's always been the main guy. Right now, he is going to be the 3rd best player in OKC. And somehow, for them to win, he needs to learn how to play off the ball and he needs to defend, which he doesn't do. It's really pretty simple. OKC, I think during the season, will have an absolutely amazing offense. You have 3 spot-up shooters who are 40% from 3 in Patterson, Melo, and Paul George. And no way you're going to keep them open, because if you keep them open, then Russell Westbrook just passes the ball to them. And if you go and mark them, you're leaving Russell Westbrook one-on-one in the lane. And we've seen what happens when you leave Russell Westbrook one-on-one in the lane. He puts you on a poster. So their offense is going to be absolutely fantastic. But their defense is where they will be lacking. So it's really interesting when it comes to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And what's going to be really interesting is at the end of next year, what happens? Do they attempt to keep all 3 of their big 3? Or at least 2 of them? Or do they lose all 3 of them, clear an unbelievable space in salary cap and start a complete full rebuild? It'll be very interesting. Now, when it comes to the New York Knicks, they got rid of a distressed asset and they got a couple of younger, capable role players. They're not going to improve to be of any significance whatsoever, but at least they got rid of Carmelo Anthony. Now, in other NBA news as well, we saw the resurfacing of Kyrie Irving. He made an appearance on ESPN's First Take with Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman. And he got a lot of flack from that. I think the next day, an ESPN pundit by the name of Will Kane came on First Take with Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman and heavily criticized the way that Kyrie Irving came off in that interview. Came off as a show-off. He took a pile of BS and dropped it on the table, is a quote that I heard come out of Will Kane's mouth. Now, don't get it twisted, people. Kyrie Irving does not owe anybody anything. He doesn't owe Will Kane or any of these pundits a thing. In fact, they're lucky that he came out to speak to them. And the reason for that is because LeBron James is going to leave Cleveland next year. He was seen in LA looking for high schools for his kids. And Kyrie just left Cleveland because it will be a dumpster fire when LeBron James leaves. And because we've talked about this before, LeBron James always took credit for everything that went right in Cleveland and always blamed the supporting staff when everything went wrong. Kyrie was going to be left with a Cleveland that wasn't built for him. It was built for LeBron, and LeBron won't be there. And I'm sure Kyrie, he's an alpha male. If you look at his personality, he takes a lot from Kobe Bryant. In fact, he sees Kobe Bryant as his mentor. And I think he got tired. He got tired of being asked the question of, what kind of father figure was LeBron James to you? A lot of people criticized him and called him spoiled from moving from a winning situation to a potentially lesser team with less potential of winning championships. But sometimes you have to do that, especially if you look at the uncertainty of the future in Cleveland. And he spoke to the media. He tried to be as honest as he can without giving the media anything to sensationalize. He refused to talk about any personal problems with LeBron James. He refused to give the media any bait to make it a huge story. So, of course, he came off as stuck up. Why does Marshawn Lynch get away with it when he speaks like that to the media and not Kyrie Irving? And I will also say this. If next year LeBron James leaves Cleveland and doesn't tell his teammates, I don't think it will be as big of a story as they made it for Kyrie Irving. The inconsistency of the media and how they cover and talk about these players is ludicrous. But it's a reality, unfortunately. We've seen the NBA. The NBA is an entity, and maybe you can't blame them because LeBron James is the face of the NBA. But they made it their business to protect the media's narrative when it comes to LeBron James. When it comes to LeBron as a player, when it comes to LeBron as a person, when it comes to LeBron as a teammate, they've protected that image. If something goes wrong in Cleveland, it's always somebody else's fault. Never LeBron. Now, at times it may not be his fault for some things, but when it is his fault, the fans can see it quicker than the media, how the blame is automatically shifted to somebody else. I understand what Kyrie Irving is doing. He might not win or contend for a title next year, but the minute LeBron James moves to the Western Conference, there will be nobody left in the Eastern Conference to challenge for the finals. It will be the Boston Celtics. They've got Gordon Hayward, they've got Kyrie Irving, they've got all the pieces they need to be a dominant team in the Eastern Conference going forward post LeBron. And that basically is what it comes down to. LeBron's inability to commit a longer future with Cleveland. Had LeBron said, I'm signing for the next 3 years, no trade clause, and then Kyrie pulled the stunt, then I will be really criticizing him. You're moving out of a winning situation for what? You won't be able to win in the future. Anyways, a bit of an angry episode, I think, this week. Maybe we should stick to the ones where I bring guests on, kind of help balance that out. But we discussed quite a few serious topics. Now, we might be away for the next week and a half because I'm traveling to South America for the very first time. Going to be there for about a week and a half, possibly 2 weeks. We'll see if we can find the time and the resources to record some podcasts from there. But if we don't, at least we'll have a lot to talk about when we come back. It's been a very interesting episode. I'm really looking forward to the feedback that you have to everything that was discussed today. I've started to really enjoy debating a lot of the listeners out there and people who are a lot of the time disagreeing with me. And believe it or not, when I bring guests on or when I debate with some of you out there, I'm learning a lot myself as well. So it's been quite an interesting ride. Thanks for listening to Sports Unhinged. I've been Mohamed Khamis, and until next time, take care.